He was a cowboy with a bullet in his body, she said. I'll stay until they take it out. The sun was rising slowly over the wide, open plains, spilling gold and orange light across the land. Dust danced gently in the morning air, stirred by the hooves of horses moving across the fields. A man rode one of these horses, tall and strong, with the kind of calm presence that made people notice him without even realizing it. His hat shaded a face marked by years of hard work and life in the open, sun-beaten air. He was a cowboy, born to the land, and to the long, quiet days where the only sounds were the wind, the animals, and the distant call of birds. Yet beneath the calm exterior he carried a secret pain, a pain that no one could see at first glance. Years ago, during an incident he never liked to talk about, a bullet had entered his body. It lodged itself deep inside him, never leaving. Doctors had told him that removing it could be dangerous, so he learned to live with it. Most people would not have survived, or if they did, they would have been forever weak. But he survived. He endured, and he became stronger in ways others could not understand. The bullet was a part of him, like a shadow that never left. Every morning he felt the weight of it, not just physically, but in his thoughts and memories. The bullet was a reminder of a day he wished he could forget. A day when life seemed unfair and the world showed him its harsh side. But cowboys like him do not complain. Pain is something you live with. It is something you carry quietly, like a badge of survival. And he carried it with him, through every long ride, every early morning, every night spent under the stars. People in town knew him, but not fully. They knew the man who could ride faster than anyone, who could handle cattle and horses better than most. They knew the man who was quiet and polite, but who seemed to carry a heaviness in his eyes. Some guessed that he had a story, but few ever tried to ask. He had built walls around himself, walls strong enough that no one could get through easily. He did not trust easily. He did not let people in. It was easier that way, easier to live with pain when it remained only yours. He had learned to do almost everything by himself. The bullet did not stop him from working. It did not stop him from waking up before the sun, saddling the horses, and riding the open plains. But there were moments when the pain hit him suddenly, sharp and cold, and he would pause, pressing his hand to the spot where the bullet rested. On those days he rode slower, worked less, and sometimes just sat quietly, letting the world go by while he breathed through the ache. Those who watched him might have thought he was resting, but they did not know the battle happening inside him. He did not have many close friends. Life as a cowboy was lonely sometimes, and his pain made it harder. People did not stay when the truth of his life showed itself, and he had stopped expecting them to. Relationships were temporary, like the wind that blew across the plains. It was easier to keep distance, easier to smile and nod politely than to let someone see the scars that could not be healed completely. He had learned the hard way that trust must be earned, and that love could sometimes leave as quickly as it came. But even in his quiet, isolated life, he had routines that gave him peace. The smell of horses in the morning, the sound of the river flowing near his small cabin, the rhythm of the reins in his hands as he guided a horse across the fields, it all mattered. Each task, each duty kept his mind from wandering too far into pain or memory. And yet the bullet was always there, a subtle, constant reminder that life could be cruel. Some nights it felt heavier, some mornings sharper, but he never let it break him completely. He had survived worse. He had endured. He also had moments of reflection. Sitting alone on the porch of his cabin, watching the sun set behind the distant hills, he would think about what he had lost and what he had survived. Friends who had left, family who had grown distant, opportunities that had disappeared because of fear or circumstance. All of it came to him in the quiet of the evening. And yet, he never let himself sink into despair. The plains were vast and full of life, and he had learned to find small joys in every day. A foal being born, A bird's song in the morning, the smell of rain coming over the fields. These small moments reminded him that life could still be beautiful, even with a bullet inside. Despite the pain, he maintained a sense of pride in himself. He was a man of action, not words. A man who faced danger not because he sought it, but because it was sometimes unavoidable in the life he had chosen. The bullet in his body had taught him resilience. It had taught him that even when life wounds you deeply, you can continue to move forward step by step. And so he moved forward day after day, riding his horses, mending fences, caring for the land and animals that had become a part of him. His reputation in the nearby towns was quiet but strong. People respected him not just for his skills as a cowboy, but for his honesty and integrity. If he promised something, he kept it. If someone needed help, he gave it without complaint. Yet the one thing he kept to himself was the story of the bullet, the day that had changed his life forever. He feared that if people knew, they would see him as broken. And he was not broken, not entirely. He was whole in his own way, shaped by struggle, pain, and survival. And then one day, life began to shift. It started slowly, almost imperceptibly, like the first breeze of spring after a long winter. A presence appeared on the edge of his life, quiet but persistent. Someone who did not flinch at his pain, someone who seemed to notice the weight he carried without asking for explanations. For the first time in years, he felt a curiosity, a cautious hope, that perhaps life could offer more than solitude. And yet the bullet remained, a silent question mark in his mind. Could he allow someone in, knowing the danger and the difficulty of the life he led? Could he share the pain he had carried for so long? As he watched the sun rise over the plains that morning, he realized that even with the bullet inside him, life was not entirely bleak. There was still room for connection, for trust, for moments of quiet joy that did not vanish with pain. But he also knew that it would take courage, his courage, and the courage of someone willing to stay by his side. The bullet would always be a part of him, but perhaps it did not have to define him completely. And so he rode on, carrying the weight of his past, his pain, and the lessons he had learned. The plains stretched endlessly before him, and in their vastness he found a strange comfort. The wind carried away whispers of old memories, the horses responded to his steady hand, and the earth beneath him reminded him of endurance. A life with a bullet in the body was not easy, but it was a life of resilience, of survival, and perhaps, in time, of unexpected connection. For now he continued his work, rising with the sun, tending to his duties and keeping his secret close. Yet somewhere deep inside, he felt the stirrings of something new, something that might one day challenge the solitude he had so carefully built. And though the bullet remained inside him, its presence no longer only meant pain. It also reminded him that he had survived, that he was strong, and that life, despite its hardships, could still hold moments worth fighting for. Had been quiet for the cowboy for so long that he had almost forgotten what it was like to feel someone truly notice him. He went about his days as usual, rising before the sun, saddling his horse, and walking through the fields to check on the cattle. The wind carried the scent of grass and earth, and the rhythm of his work soothed him in ways nothing else could. Yet now there was someone new in his life, a woman who appeared as if she had always been meant to be there. She arrived quietly, riding into town with a gentle smile and eyes that seemed to see more than he wanted them to. At first, he tried to ignore her. He had learned long ago that letting people in was dangerous. Pain was easier to carry alone, but she was persistent in the softest way possible. She did not ask questions he wasn't ready to answer. She did not try to fix what he had learned to live with. Instead, she stayed near, offering a presence that felt steady, reliable, and safe. When he worked on the fences or tended to the animals, she would quietly help, learning the rhythm of the land, the horses, and the life he had built. She never spoke too much, but her eyes carried understanding, and that mattered more than words. One afternoon, after a long ride, he felt a sudden sharp pain in his side. He pressed his hand over the spot where the bullet rested, wincing slightly, but tried to keep moving. She noticed immediately, walking over without hesitation. "It hurts, doesn't it?" she said softly. He shook his head, refusing to admit it aloud. "You don't have to hide it," she said. "I can see it. I know it's there." That was something he had not heard in years, someone acknowledging his pain without fear, without judgment. He looked at her, unsure how to respond, but felt a small sense of relief. In the days that followed, she stayed near him, helping with chores, sharing meals, and sitting quietly as he worked. There was no pressure, no questions about the past he did not want to speak about. She simply existed in his world, a steady presence in the chaos of his quiet life. Slowly, the walls he had built began to feel less necessary. He began to enjoy the small things she brought: a laugh at a joke, a warm cup of coffee waiting for him in the morning, the comfort of someone listening when he spoke just enough to share. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in shades of pink and purple, he finally spoke about the bullet. He had avoided this conversation for years, fearing what it might bring. "It's dangerous," he said, his voice low. "Doctors say removing it could kill me. But living with it, it's like carrying a shadow everywhere I go." She listened quietly, not interrupting, not recoiling. She placed her hand over his where he had unconsciously pressed against the wound and said, "I don't care about the shadow. I'll stay through it." The simplicity of her words struck him, and for the first time in years he felt a flicker of hope. Over the next few weeks, they spent more time together. She learned the rhythm of his life, riding beside him, helping with cattle, and sharing quiet moments in the evenings. They spoke little of the past, instead focusing on the present: the wind in the grass, the smell of the earth after rain, the sound of horses moving through the field. Slowly, he began to realize that life could feel lighter, even with the bullet still inside him. There was someone who accepted him, not despite his pain, but including it, as if it were a part of the whole story she wanted to be in. Then came the day the doctors said the bullet could no longer remain. They explained that it had shifted slightly and could cause permanent damage if left untreated. The cowboy felt fear rising in his chest, a feeling he had not allowed himself in years. The thought of surgery, of someone touching the part of him that had been private for so long, terrified him. He had survived the bullet for so long, relying only on himself, and now he had to trust others. He looked at her, expecting her to turn away, to leave, and he was surprised when she simply nodded. "I'll stay," she said, "until they take it out, and after that too, I'm not going anywhere." Her calm assurance gave him courage he did not know he still had. As the surgery approached, the cowboy felt a mixture of fear and relief. Fear because of the unknown, relief because he would not face it alone. She was there every step of the way, sitting beside him during consultations, holding his hand when the pain or worry became too much, and speaking words of comfort that were simple but powerful. "You're strong," she told him. "You've survived this long. You can survive this too. And I'll be here." Her presence made the days easier, the nights less lonely, and the fear more bearable. During this time, he began to notice how much he had missed companionship. Even the smallest gestures, her hand brushing against his accidentally, the way she smiled when he achieved something small on the farm, the quiet laughter they shared at simple jokes, made him feel alive in ways he had forgotten. He realized that living with pain for so long had made him forget the joy of connection. It was strange and wonderful to feel this slowly returning, like the sun rising after a long night. He also learned about her past, though in pieces, shared quietly over coffee in the mornings or as they rode together. She too had known hardships, but she carried them differently. She did not wear them as armor but as lessons. Listening to her, he realized that pain did not have to be a prison. It could exist alongside life, as long as someone was willing to share it with you. The thought of this was both comforting and frightening. For years he had been alone by choice, fearing that no one could endure what he carried. But now he began to wonder if perhaps someone could. Perhaps she could. Their bond deepened in the quiet, simple ways of everyday life. She did not demand grand gestures or declarations. She simply stayed, persistent yet gentle. She learned the rhythm of his pain, noticing when he moved slower, when the ache became sharper, when he tried to hide it. And she never judged. She never asked him to be someone he was not. Instead, she allowed him to be the cowboy who had survived the past, who had carried a bullet in his body, and who now began to realize that trust and love were still possible. One evening, as they sat watching the sunset together, the cowboy felt the weight of the bullet in a new way. It had always been a symbol of pain, of a life he had struggled to carry alone. But now, it was also a symbol of endurance and survival. And most importantly, it was a symbol that someone had chosen to stay with him, despite it all. The realization was overwhelming, and he felt emotions he had not allowed himself to feel in years: gratitude, hope, and even a quiet sense of happiness. As the day of surgery approached, he felt nervous but also strangely calm. The presence of the woman beside him had shifted something deep within him. He no longer feared facing the procedure alone. He had someone who believed in him, who trusted in his strength, and who had promised to stay. Her commitment became his anchor, a reminder that even the hardest battles could be faced with someone by your side. In the nights leading up to the surgery, he found himself talking more than he had in years, sharing stories of the plains, of the work, of the moments that had made him who he was. And she listened, never interrupting, never judging. She simply stayed, offering quiet encouragement and a steady hand. He began to see that pain did not have to isolate him, that living with a bullet in his body did not have to mean living without connection. Life could be both painful and beautiful at the same time, and she was showing him that reality. When the morning of the surgery finally arrived, he felt a surge of fear, but it was tempered by the warmth of her presence. She held his hand as he walked into the hospital, her calm voice grounding him. "I'll stay," she said again, "until they take it out, and I'll be here after too." Those words were simple, but they carried the weight of a promise, one he had not dared to hope for in years. And in that moment, he realized that perhaps, for the first time in his life, he was not truly alone. The days before the surgery were long and heavy. The cowboy felt a weight inside him, one that had nothing to do with the bullet itself. Fear was something he had not faced in years, not the quiet ache of pain, but the deep, uncertain fear of the unknown. He had survived because he controlled his world, because he knew the land, the animals, the routines. But now he had to give control to others, strangers in white coats, and to the uncertainty of what might happen during the operation. It was a feeling he did not like. It made him restless, made his hands shake as he tried to saddle a horse or check on a fence. The woman noticed immediately. She would arrive in the mornings before him, waiting with coffee and a warm blanket, and she stayed into the evenings, brushing his hair back from his forehead or sitting quietly beside him as the sun disappeared behind the hills. She said little, but her presence spoke louder than any words could. She did not try to fix him. She did not tell him to be brave or to face the surgery with courage. Instead, she simply stayed. Her calmness was contagious. Slowly, the cowboy found himself leaning on her presence, taking strength from her even when he refused to admit it aloud. The nights were the hardest. Lying in bed in his small cabin, he would feel the familiar ache of the bullet, sharper than usual with the fear that something could go wrong. His mind would wander back to the day it had entered his body, to the memories he had long tried to forget. He would see the faces of people he had trusted who had disappointed him, the harshness of the world he had survived, and the isolation he had chosen for so long. At those times he felt small and fragile, almost like a young boy again, afraid of the storm but unsure how to face it. And yet, Every night she was there. Sitting by the fire or beside the bed, she would hand him a warm cup of tea or gently place her hand on his shoulder. "You're not alone," she would say. That simple statement, repeated over and over, began to carry weight in his heart. He had spent years thinking he had to carry everything himself, that showing fear or weakness would make him vulnerable. But now he realized that vulnerability did not mean weakness. It meant allowing someone to be with you, to share the burden, to walk beside you even when the path was uncertain. During the day, they would take small rides together, just to keep his body moving and his mind focused. The cowboy rode carefully, feeling every shift in the horse beneath him, listening to the sounds of the wind through the grass, and noticing the rhythm of life he had almost forgotten. She rode beside him, her laughter soft in the morning air, her presence steady and comforting. They did not speak much. Words were not necessary. The connection they shared was quiet, built in small gestures, in the shared rhythm of work, and in the steady beat of two hearts learning to trust each other again. He started to notice the little things she did, folding his jacket when he came in cold, making sure he had eaten before leaving for a long ride, adjusting his hat when the sun hit his eyes too sharply. She noticed when he was tired, when the pain flared, or when he tried to hide his fear, and always, without fail, she stayed. She did not falter, did not leave, did not question whether the burden was too much. That consistency began to work on him in ways he had never expected. For the first time, he felt that someone's presence could be a balm, a light against the shadows he had carried for so long. Despite her calm, the reality of the surgery weighed heavily on him. The doctors had explained the risks, had told him what could happen if something went wrong. Each explanation tightened the knot in his chest. He tried to work on the land, to focus on the chores, but his mind kept wandering to what might happen. He imagined the worst, that the bullet could shift unexpectedly, that pain could overwhelm him, or that he might not wake up the same. The fear gnawed at him, making him restless and tense, and for the first time, he realized that courage was not the absence of fear but moving forward despite it. One evening, as the sun set behind the distant hills and the sky turned pink and gold, he sat on the porch, staring into the horizon. She came to sit beside him, quiet as always, and waited for him to speak first. "I'm scared," he admitted, the words barely audible but heavy with the weight of years. She put her hand over his, squeezing gently. "I know," she said. "It's okay to be scared. I'll stay with you." Every step of the way. Her voice was calm, unwavering, and it filled the spaces in his heart that had been empty for so long. For a moment, he allowed himself to lean on her, to let her strength support him, and in that moment he felt a warmth he had not known in years. The night before the surgery, sleep was difficult. He lay awake, thinking of the procedure, imagining the sensations, and remembering the past pain he had carried for years. She sat by his side, occasionally brushing a strand of hair from his forehead, speaking softly to keep him calm. "You're not alone," she repeated, and again he realized that it was not just words, it was a promise. A promise that she would not leave, that she would not falter, and that she would stay even through the uncertainty and the fear. Her commitment became a shield against the storm in his mind. The morning of the surgery arrived, and the air was crisp and quiet. He dressed slowly, his hands trembling slightly, and walked with her to the waiting car. The sun was rising, spilling light over the plains in a way that felt almost like a blessing. He looked at her, expecting to see doubt or hesitation, and instead saw calm, steady eyes that mirrored his own determination. She smiled gently, holding his hand. "I'm here," she said. "And I'm staying." That simple statement anchored him, giving him courage he did not know he still had. At the hospital, the world felt different, bright, cold, and unfamiliar. Doctors and nurses moved quickly, preparing him for the surgery. Normally, he would have felt overwhelmed, anxious, and alone. But with her presence beside him, the fear became something he could face. He held her hand tightly as the anesthesiologist explained the procedure, listening to the words but finding that their weight was lighter than expected. Her calmness made the machines, the bright lights, and the unknown seem less frightening. When it was time to enter the operating room, he took a deep breath, feeling the steady squeeze of her hand one last time. "I'll be waiting," she said softly. And in that moment, he understood something he had not allowed himself to believe in years. That pain and fear could exist alongside love and trust. That survival was not just about enduring alone, but also about allowing someone to share the burden with you. The thought filled him with a courage he had not known before, and as he drifted toward sleep, he felt her presence like a protective light guiding him through the unknown. While he was under, she waited outside. She paced quietly, her mind filled with thoughts of him, of the life they had started to build together, and of the promise she had made. Every minute felt like an hour, but she did not leave. She reminded herself silently that she had chosen this, that staying was part of her commitment, and that her presence could be a lifeline even when he could not see it. Her dedication was quiet but powerful, a testament to the strength of patience, love, and trust. Hours passed slowly. Finally, the surgery was over. The doctors emerged, their faces calm and reassuring. The bullet had been removed successfully, and the cowboy was in stable condition. Relief washed over her, but she did not show it too much. Instead, she focused on the next step, staying with him, helping him recover, and making sure he knew he was not alone. She walked to his side as he slowly awoke, holding his hand and speaking softly, "I'm here, you're safe, and I'm not leaving." When he opened his eyes, he felt the warmth of her hand, the steady calm of her presence, and a strange, comforting sense of lightness. The bullet that had burdened him for so long was gone, but what stayed with him was stronger than fear or pain. It was trust, connection, and the quiet power of someone who refused to leave. In that moment, he realized that survival had never just been about enduring alone. It had been about learning to allow someone in, about accepting help, and about understanding that courage and love often walk together, even through the hardest battles. When the cowboy woke fully from the surgery, the first thing he noticed was the absence of the familiar weight in his body. The bullet that had been with him for so many years was gone. There was relief, yes, but also something more complicated, a mixture of disbelief, cautious hope, and a quiet fear of what life would be like without the shadow he had carried for so long. He had survived with it for years, and it had become a part of him. Now he had to learn how to live differently, to move in the world without the constant reminder of pain. She was there immediately as she had promised, sitting by his side, holding his hand and smiling with quiet reassurance. "It's done," she said softly. "You're safe. And I'm staying." Her words were gentle, but they carried the weight of all the nights, all the fear, and all the moments she had waited for him. He looked at her, unsure how to respond because this was new territory. For the first time, he felt that someone had truly chosen to stay through everything, the fear, the pain, and the long years he had carried the bullet inside him. Recovery was slow. His body felt sore and weak in ways it hadn't in years. The wound ached, muscles felt stiff, and the process of relearning how to move without guarding the injured spot was unfamiliar. But she stayed, just as she had promised. She helped him walk, brought meals he could easily eat, and made sure he rested when he needed to. She did not rush him. She did not push him beyond what he could do. Instead, she adjusted to his pace, moving alongside him with patience and quiet determination. Her presence became part of his healing, as essential as the medicine, the bandages, and the gentle care of the doctors. At first, the cowboy felt a strange emptiness. The bullet had been a part of his identity, a constant companion that reminded him of what he had survived. Without it, he was forced to confront something he had avoided for years, life without the familiar weight of pain. The absence was unsettling. He didn't know how to feel or what to expect. But she noticed, as she always did, and she did not allow him to retreat into silence or fear. She encouraged him gently with small words, soft smiles, and quiet gestures that said, "You are not alone. You never have been alone." As the days passed, he began to notice the subtle changes in himself. He could move more freely, ride his horse without flinching, and even sleep longer stretches at night without waking from sudden pain. The world seemed brighter somehow, the colors sharper, the smells stronger, and the sounds clearer. He noticed birds singing in the mornings, the gentle flow of the river near his cabin, and the distant hills glowing with the sunlight. Life, which had always been about survival and endurance, suddenly held moments of beauty that he had forgotten existed. She stayed through every moment. Sometimes they would sit quietly together on the porch, watching the sun rise or set, sharing the rhythm of life in silence. Sometimes they would ride through the fields, laughing softly when the horse stumbled, or when one of them nearly lost balance. Other times she would simply sit with him as he worked on the land, never intruding, never demanding attention, just sharing the quiet companionship that had become so important to him. He realized that this, more than anything else, was healing. The presence of someone who refused to leave was more powerful than any medicine, stronger than any procedure, and deeper than any words he could speak. He began to speak more, slowly sharing stories of his life, the days before the bullet, and the moments he had survived alone. She listened, never judging, never interrupting, and sometimes offering a soft word or question that encouraged him to continue. It felt strange at first to open up after years of silence, but he realized that it was easier with her because she did not demand perfection, courage, or stoicism. She simply accepted him as he was, scars and all, and that acceptance became a balm to his soul. The cowboy began to notice changes in his own behavior. He laughed more freely, smiled more often, and even began to enjoy small moments of connection with others in the town. He still worked hard, still rose with the sun, and still cared for his horses and land with dedication. But now there was a softness to his life that had been absent for years. He allowed himself to notice beauty in the world, to feel gratitude for the simple things, and to accept that happiness did not have to be fleeting or impossible. It could exist alongside struggle, and even alongside the memory of pain he had carried for so long. One afternoon, as they worked together on the fields, she paused to look at him. "You've changed," she said softly. He looked at her, unsure how to respond because he had not noticed himself. "I feel lighter," he admitted. "The bullet is gone, but it's more than that. You stayed. You didn't leave." Her smile was gentle, but it carried warmth that touched him deeply. "I told you I would," she said. "And I meant it." The cowboy realized then that the true healing had not been the removal of the bullet, but the presence of someone who chose to stay, someone who saw him, accepted him, and refused to abandon him no matter how difficult life became. As the weeks passed, their bond grew stronger. They shared quiet meals, long rides, and simple conversations that had the power to comfort and strengthen. The cowboy began to trust again, slowly letting down the walls he had built around his heart for decades. He realized that the past, the bullet, and the pain were part of his story, but they did not have to define him. Life could continue, and it could continue with joy, connection, and even love. And in this realization, he felt a freedom he had not experienced in years. Recovery was not only physical but emotional. There were days when he felt fear creep back, shadows of old pain that reminded him of what he had endured. But she remained, offering reassurance without overwhelming him, listening without judgment, and simply existing as a steady presence in a world that had often been unpredictable and harsh. Her commitment showed him that endurance was not only about surviving alone, but about sharing the journey with someone who refuses to leave. The lessons he learned from her patience and love became part of his own strength, guiding him toward a life that was not just about survival, but about living fully. He began to dream again. Small dreams at first, riding farther into the hills, spending time with neighbors, enjoying the work on the land without constantly thinking of pain. Then, slowly, larger dreams emerged. The thought of building a home with space for both of them, planning for a future where laughter and connection mattered more than the scars of the past. The bullet had once defined what he thought was possible, limiting his sense of life and hope. Now, with it gone and with her by his side, he saw that possibilities were endless. One evening, after months of recovery, they sat together on the porch, the sky glowing in shades of gold and pink. He looked at her, the woman who had stayed through the fear, the pain, and the long nights, and he felt a deep gratitude he could not fully express. Words seemed insufficient. Instead, he simply took her hand, feeling the warmth and strength in it, and realized that she had changed him more profoundly than any event, any struggle, or even the bullet itself. Her choice to stay had reshaped his life. In time, he returned fully to the work he loved. He rode the horses, tended the cattle, and walked the fields with ease. Life continued in its simple rhythms, but now it carried a new dimension: hope, trust, and the quiet joy of connection. The land was still the same, the sun still rose and set, and the wind still carried whispers across the plains. But for the first time in years, he felt fully alive, not just surviving, but living, breathing, and looking forward to what each day might bring. Their story became one not just of survival, but of resilience, patience, and love that refuses to leave. The cowboy had once believed that pain had to be carried alone, that endurance was measured by isolation and quiet strength. Now he knew differently. Endurance could coexist with trust, pain could coexist with love, and survival could grow into something richer, deeper, and more beautiful than he had ever imagined. And so, life continued on the open plains. The cowboy, once weighed down by a bullet in his body and the memories of years spent in solitude, learned to live fully again. The woman, steadfast and patient, remained by his side, proving that love and commitment were as powerful as any force in the world. Together, they rode into the horizon, facing each day with courage, hope, and the quiet joy of having found each other in a world that had once felt heavy and lonely. The bullet was gone, but what remained was far more important: a life renewed, a heart opened, and a connection that would never be broken. Pain had been endured, fear had been faced, and love had stayed. And in that simple truth, the cowboy found freedom, healing, and the promise of a future filled not with shadows, but with light.